Cold kitchens have secrets, but this one carried death in every meal. Imagine sitting down for dinner, trusting the hands that cooked your food, never knowing that each bite might be your last. In the shadows of New Orleans, behind the warmth of a busy kitchen, there was a woman no one truly saw until it was far too late. And tonight, on Night Archive, we uncover the chilling story of Violet, the kitchen slave who turned silence into vengeance. Before we begin, if you love dark, untold stories like this, make sure you like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is only the beginning. Violet wasn't born into power. She wasn't even born into freedom. She lived her life in the background, inside a grand New Orleans household where her name was spoken only when something went wrong. The kitchen was her world, hot, suffocating, endless. Day after day, she cooked meals for people who barely looked at her. People who didn't care if she was tired, sick, or hurting. But here's what makes this story different. Violet was always watching. She noticed everything: who ate first, who complained the most, who treated her like she was invisible, and who treated her worse than that. Every insult, every order barked without kindness, every cruel glance, it all stayed with her. And over time, something inside her changed. At first, it was small: a quiet shift, a longer stare, a slower response. Nothing anyone could point to, but in her mind, a list was forming, not written on paper, but carved into memory. One night, something happened that no one outside that house ever truly understood. A dinner was served as usual. The table was full. Laughter, conversation, the clinking of silverware. Everything seemed normal until it was. One person fell ill, then another, then another. At first, they thought it was spoiled food, maybe something gone bad. But Violet knew better, because she had made sure it wasn't an accident. The next morning, the house was quieter. Fear had entered the walls. People whispered. Servants avoided eye contact. And Violet, she moved through the kitchen like nothing had changed. But something had. The suspicion didn't come immediately. Why would it? Violet had always been there. Always quiet. Always obedient. Invisible people don't become suspects until patterns begin to appear. Days passed, and it happened again. Another meal. Another sickness. This time worse. Now the house was no longer calm. Panic started to grow. The master of the house demanded answers. Food was inspected. Ingredients were questioned. But everything looked normal. Because Violet was careful. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She knew that if she moved too fast, she would be caught. So she waited. She chose her moments. She made sure each act blended into the ordinary. And that's what made it terrifying. No one knew when it would happen next. Some refused to eat. Others forced themselves, afraid of punishment. Every meal became a risk. Every plate held doubt. And Violet, she watched them hesitate. There was something powerful in that moment. For the first time in her life, the people who controlled everything were afraid. But power like that doesn't stay hidden forever. One servant began to notice small things: Violet's timing, the way she handled certain ingredients, the way she avoided eating anything herself. It wasn't enough to accuse her, but it planted a seed. And once suspicion starts, it grows. The master ordered stricter supervision. Meals were prepared under watchful eyes. Ingredients were checked twice. But even then, something slipped through. Another incident. This time, it couldn't be ignored. Now the question was, what is happening? It was, who is doing this? And slowly, all eyes turned to the one person who had access to everything: Violet. She was questioned, not gently, not kindly, but she didn't break. She stayed calm, quiet, almost too calm, and that made them more afraid, because guilt usually comes with fear, but Violet showed none. What they didn't understand was this: Violet wasn't acting out of panic. She wasn't trying to escape. She wasn't even trying to survive. She was sending a message. Every act was deliberate, every moment chosen. It wasn't chaos, it was control. And for someone who had lived her entire life without control, that feeling was intoxicating. But even the most careful plans have cracks. The servant who had been watching her finally spoke, not with proof, but with enough doubt to force action. Violet was separated, watched more closely than ever before. The kitchen, her world, was no longer hers alone. And just like that, her power began to fade. Without access, without freedom to act, the pattern stopped. No more sickness, no more fear at the table. But the damage had already been done. The house would never feel safe again, because even after Violet was removed, one question remained: how long had this been happening before anyone noticed? Some say she confessed. Others say she never spoke a word, that she kept her silence until the very end, taking her reasons with her. But maybe her reasons were already clear. Years of being unseen, years of being treated as less than human, years of pain that had nowhere to go, until it did, and it came out, one meal at a time. That's what makes this story so unsettling. It's not just about what Violet did. It's about how easily it happened. How someone invisible can become the most dangerous person in the room without anyone realizing. Because sometimes the people we ignore the most are the ones paying the closest attention. And sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's patience. So next time you sit down to eat, ask yourself, how well do you really know the hands that prepared your food? And if this story made you think or gave you chills, drop a comment below with your thoughts. Would you have suspected Violet sooner? Or would you have trusted her like everyone else? Don't forget to share this story with someone who loves dark mysteries. And stay with Ignite Archive for more stories that hide in the shadows. You have not enough humanizer words left. Upgrade your surfer plan